And we are live. Hello everyone, welcome back to Hex Studios. You've all read the title. I will be making a Japanese themed pixel art. Are you ready? Because I am. Let's do this. To kickstart this wonderful journey, I drew out the concept of what I wanted to achieve. The first thing that sparked to my mind was a waterfall view from far. I began to make a balcony where we will be sitting down admiring the rise of a new day. Once the outline was done, I decided to go with a more cartoony look compared to the previous entries. As you can see, I used a red, purple, and blue color instead of a natural color like brown. This was again to give more of a highlighted style to it. From there, I made an outline of what the terrain would roughly look like. I gave the stones, grass a bit more of a swamp palette. This would give a sense of realism into the area, showing how long it's aged. When doing the grass, I wanted to step up detailing and shading from Obsidian Drift. So instead of placing the grass first on top of the stone edge, I instead detailed the stone or land first and then started to draw lines around the area, either going lighter or darker as I got closer to the center. By doing this, I was able to make the land look more detailed, added a sense of 3D with the different colors representing the levels of light. Once I completed it, I asked myself, was there a better way of doing this? Probably, but I doubt it would have looked cleaner and more detailed like this. Besides, it now looks way more natural than just being plastered on top of it. When detailing the lower layer of cliffs, I stumbled upon a problem that I had to deal with. That was creating the geometry of cliffs. It really wasn't easy, but when doing the left side, it wasn't that bad since I was able to add a couple of big stones, and with that it added a bigger sense of 3D into the background. But when doing the right side, okay, I just became lazy with this one. But I did it for a good reason though, since I had a plan that would help me avoid this problem. Oh, how naive I was. For now. But not for long. Once I covered the land with grass on the right, I decided to make the left side completely out of grass, just to avoid the sense of repetition. With that now being finished, I placed a suitable solid color that would represent the water and the waterfalls. And looking at the land on the lower left, it looks like as if you were to look at your own reflection and gaze at it for a while. So with that now fitting in without any trouble, it was time to move on to the next level. Moving forward, I thought how I was going to fix the issue with the cliffs' view since it looked okay, I guess. That's when the idea rose into my mind. Freeze! Once I made the outline and then placed the frame on top of it so I don't waste my time detailing areas that don't need to be detailed, I got to it. As you can see, I have returned to the cherry blossom species. However, instead of limiting myself to one tree, I'm going to do as many as I can in this one. When doing the cherry blossom trees, they were actually not that bad to do. In fact, it was pretty satisfying to see every small detail being placed. Once I finished with the trees, I placed them at the bottom half of the background and they did cover up most of the areas that didn't look decent compared to everything else. Before continuing with the upper half of the background, I started working on the water. When working on the water, I wanted to show a sense of cartooniness. Is that a word? So, I gave it a white outline. After that, I started to add different colors of blue to light green, showing where the water changed in its level. At the bottom half of the water, I wanted to show the water in all of its beauty, giving it numerous shapes, patterns, and bright colors. Now looking at the land, it doesn't connect with anything at the slightest. The land looked too mundane in color compared to the cheery cherry trees and the crystal clear water. It just doesn't fit with anything looking that desaturated. So, I went back and gave the land and the grass especially a much brighter color. And after taking a second look at the waterfall, I decided to redo it since the correlation between the two colors looked too sudden. So, I gave it a quick cleanup, making the correlation much better and calmer. In In fact, I actually loved how this turned out. It looks so majestic. Like seriously, put these two side to side and tell me which one looks better. From there, I started to add trees in the upper layer and started to detail them just like the bottom ones. But the further away it was from our perspective, the less detail I've made them. And that just means I use less colors than the ones that are closer to us. With that now done, it's time to fill in the empty areas. Hey, is it just me, or do these areas specifically look like a house? That's right, we're adding buildings to this as well. And even better, the facades designs remain beautifully faithful to the overarching theme that we're trying to achieve. When designing the tea houses, I really wanted to go in on the bright colorful colors that looked distinct from the land and the trees. So, I thought the classic blue and red would fit perfectly for this in terms of look and design. I also didn't detail it too much for two reasons. One, for it not breaking the less detailed points that I made for the trees earlier, and the other one being that it doesn't take away the idea of everything being cartoony. Also, when creating the tea houses, I decided to mostly make them out of timber to replicate how Japanese people live with timber structures. What I mean by that is that in the winter, they close every opening to the house since it gets very cold, especially at night. But in the summer, everything is open due to it being very hot, and since timber isn't a great source of heat, it makes sense why they would choose that material. Once the tea houses were finally constructed, I filled out the rest of the empty spaces that the trees didn't cover. I did this by adding paths that went up mountains even further. Now with that done, it was time to move on to the next set of mountains. When making the next set of mountains, my original vision was that there would be another waterfall to the left. And with many attempts done to accomplish this task, this was the best I could do. Another waterfall next to the stream of water exiting from a cave. Although this concept was good, I knew right there and then that something has to change because this was not cutting it at all. So instead, I thought that adding another set of cliffs might work, but I just couldn't find another way around it. Until I realized after I made an okay mountain on the left side that cliffs was not the best way to go anymore. The best way to moving forward was with hills. When doing the hills, I did the same thing before with the grass and the land. However, I instead completely covered the hills with grass. And the more it went away from the horizon or light, the darker it got. At first, I wasn't too sure how this would look, but I was confident that it was too early to tell since the sky wasn't finished, and was hoping that it would fit in the final version. After that, I spent some time trying to add a curved bridge, and that did not work at the slightest. This was all because I had limited space between the hills, and anything that is curved, small, and far away would honestly ruin the view now. I'm sure there is a way to making it work, but a curved bridge was not making it at all for me. So instead, I moved on to making mountains. These actually fitted in really nicely, and when coloring them from the sides, it really made them stand out to everything else. However, I didn't want the mountain to reconnect to the horizon since I wanted something open or clear. So I re-sculpted the mountain, or mountains at that point. It took a bit longer than I expected, all thanks to the shading, but I do love how they look, especially with this curved, spiky, wavy pattern I gave to them. After that, I re-attempted to add a bridge again, but this bridge will be connected to the floor and hills in many ways. When doing this at first, I wanted to keep the same red, purple, and blue shade like I did with the front. But after some time, it looked off being that far. So instead, I tried a couple of color palettes, and the one that suited it the best was this pale purple color, since it doesn't blend with the background in any way. Upon finishing the bridge, I decided to add a waterfall to the back to show where the water in the horizon is coming from. Finally, I added a bright yellow sky to set the time of day of this place. And just like that, the first draft was done, and now it was time for the cleanup. The cleanup is practically, well, a cleanup to fix some areas that I didn't think fitted well or was a bit overkill. The first thing that I felt was best to fix was the tree, since it took most of the space in the canvas and the lighting was incorrect at points. So I took off some branches and redid a part of the hills and the mountain, and gave the trees a more of a bright pink color, and then fixed the lighting by making the trees at the bottom left and right darker and more saturated than the other trees at the top and center. And that was the trees done. I then added a nice big sun on top of the center of the canvas. This was to show where the light was coming from. After that, I realized I forgot to add a frame, which, by the way, was one of the earliest ideas I wanted to add on to this. So I thought it would be fitting to add it on top of a hill. I did struggle when making the shape at first, but I did eventually got it after some time in practice. The choice of color was going to be the same as before, but I decided to stick to a more magenta to red and an apple green to a teal idea. This looked amazing, and after moving some areas down to make it look more crooked, it fitted in perfectly, all thanks to the terrain. The next thing I wanted to fix and add was the water. Here, I quickly fixed up the right waterfall with the lighting being incorrect. After that, I made the top waterfall a bit whiter just to show the amount of mist being formed in the waterfall. It was just adding reflections in some areas and making the edges of some rocks more shiny. Finally, I added some clouds in the sky, and just like that, the Japanese pixel art was finally completed. I present to you Whispering Waterfalls. So, with everything now done, do I have something to say about this?
Yeah, of course you do. Was there any inspiration in making this?
Well, yeah. Some inspiration came from Mario Wonder in the Third World, while some inspiration came from Sonic Unleashed. But the biggest inspiration behind this was easily Crash Bandicoot 4 It's About Time in the fourth dimension, Tranquility Falls. And the bridge was inspired by Yuzahara's Wooden Bridge Museum.
Was there any ideas that wasn't mentioned or that didn't make the cut?
Well, yeah, there was actually supposed to be a fifth tea house at the right side. This ultimately got replaced by a small hill just because I really did not have that much space on the canvas to make this idea work at the time.
What was the hardest part when making this pixel art?
Oh, the hardest part was easily the hills, no doubt about it. I was stuck, thinking what could I add there for a long while until the idea of the hills finally came in.
Last question. Is there any updates or final changes you will make to this art?
Yeah, easily no. I'm happy how Whispering Waterfall looks. I definitely think I achieved more of a cartoony art style to it compared to the previous entries, and I really would not change anything about it. With that now done, I hope you all enjoyed this episode. Remember to like and subscribe, and I'll see you all in the next episode. Try to find the 2 Easter eggs in Whispering Waterfalls and let me know in the comments. Stay awesome.